This is Shylo Bijou, and you are listening to Grit and Grace. Good afternoon or evening. It's Shylo Bijou, and you are watching another episode of Grit and Grace. And I have an incredible woman, cancer survivor, and so much more. Let's get started. Okay, today we have Natalie Zeleznikar. I said it right. I know.
Yay.
You have one of those last names. We were talking about it. My last name too is crazy. I love it. You are in the same town as me, which I think is so much more fun today because we are going to let the Northland see this and also everyone around the world because this is international. And I'm really excited to share your story. We were talking just a little bit ago. And we're going to definitely dive into some things because, wow, do we share a lot of things in common that you may or may not know. And that was just in the first 5 minutes of talking. So I'm excited. First and foremost, why don't you, for our viewers or listeners, give us a little background. Who are you? What did you do? How did this all get started? Obviously, you're an author.
Right.
We're on here to promote your book because your book is incredible. You did give me a little sneak peek and I'm excited. But I want everyone to know who you are. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you got started, and your background.
Yeah, I've lived in Duluth for 30 years. I'm a nursing home administrator. I have been in the business of taking care of people 85 to 100. Kind of the best generation, I have always said. I'm a mom. I was busy in hockey when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2015. And I grew up on a farm in St. Francis, Minnesota, and lived a great life there. Moved to Duluth, ended up meeting a man at the nursing home. I always said you're the only person that was under 85. So there you go.
There you
got
go.
married to Duluth. I'd only been to Duluth one time before. And so here I am 30 years later and I'm still here. So, so when I got diagnosed in 2015, it was kind of like, I was running a business. I was a CEO. I had worked in healthcare my whole life. I had started a business, kind of approached it like I did everything else in life. Okay, let's just check this off the list. And it didn't go exactly like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because what I learned the hard way is, anything medical, I've had so many mistakes, from major medical mistakes to plastic surgery mistakes and I'm doing a whole episode on that tomorrow because it's something nobody really talks about. But I know, if you start talking about medical mistakes, I don't care what kind, it's horrific. And we have to be our own advocates. I almost lost all 3 of my children to medical mistakes, misdiagnosis. And it's because I wasn't brave enough to stand up. But by the time I got to my son, my youngest, we did almost lose him. We were days, weeks away from going to Mayo. We had to stand up for it because I'm like, this is wrong. And we had a good nurse who stood up and it was also an advocate for my son. So I definitely know how that is. So let's talk about that journey right now, because I know your book is based on your journey, your recovery, things that gone through.
Great.
I mean, tell us, let's just give a background. I mean, you get diagnosed with cancer, number one. How does that feel? I don't care what stage, what it is, cancer.
I was shocked. I was healthy. I was, 48. And felt great. I was 6 months late on my mammogram, but I'm late for everything. So, that's normal for me. So, I figured it's stage 1. But honestly, when they called me, I knew when they biopsied, I remember the tears going down my eyes, hitting my hand, because it took so long for them on the screen looking at the x-rays. And I knew from the way the body language of the technician that something wasn't right before I got the call, even though I was telling my mind, oh, it's probably fibroid cyst like my mom's always had, and because I'd heard that language, with her many, many times. So I was like, my husband's like, let's just wait until we find out for sure. Let's not worry about this. And then when I got a call, I was at work doing the same thing. And I remember I took the call. I was in my office at work and it was like, okay, I have to go out now and do what I do a lot of other days, act happy when I'm not happy, except I have to put this information in my head that just it was like I just had a sucker punch, like I got bucked off a horse and I lost my wind, is basically how I felt. The same feeling of, oh my God, what, now what? How am I going to run a company? I've got 2 kids in hockey. How are we going to do this? And what is this going to look like? And you go in a solution mode in your brain when you don't know all the answers and nobody can tell you any definitive answers. Mm-hmm. And I found it interesting, like different than any other business decision or business challenge or family life. It was overwhelming. I didn't sleep for the days to come till the call came, waiting, because it was hard to sleep and pretend. Not very good at pretending. I wouldn't want to tell anybody, because why tell anybody and worry anybody? Didn't want to talk to anybody, because then they'll know in your voice. It's surely your mother or your friends will know by your tone of voice that you're off. So you kind of withdraw. And that's what I did until kept myself busy so nobody could get a hold of me until the call came. And then I didn't want to tell anybody then either, because nobody wants to hear the C word. So it's like, okay, I don't really want to tell anybody, let alone my boys. It was hockey. Hermantown was going to state. Our son was a senior. It's like, okay, this is his moment. When is the right time to tell anybody you have cancer? So
to give perspective, not Minnesota people, if you don't understand the incredible amount of energy and things that go into a hockey. I mean, and I know that sounds silly, but people outside, right. it's a very, very family busy thing. When your kids are playing hockey at those levels, your life is hockey. And then you have your businesses and you have all the things, but like, I get it. So people watching from all over are like, well, hockey, I mean, she brought it up. Hockey's a big deal here, and hockey is life. So these kids are invested, the family's invested. So it's so important. I understand how you feel as a mom. You're like, I don't want to tell them, because you don't want to put that burden on them. But at the same time, you're going through all these things as a woman, as a mother, and you're going, I have a husband I got to take care of. I have children I have to take care of, and then all the things. So it's extremely, the emotional stuff that's going on in your head right now is just mind blowing. And trying to keep it all together.
It was trying to, the good thing was when the band played, when they had the kids on the big, teleprompter things at the, you're at the show, you're at the Excel Energy Center, and it's like all the senior parents are crying because it's just a fun moment. So it's like my tears could just kind of blend in with everybody else's tears. Nobody knew that I was crying for different reasons, right, because you could just go with it. And I figured, well, what's another week going to matter if I don't tell anybody yet? But all along, I knew I had to meet with surgeons and figure out a plan. And it was becoming shorter and shorter for the window of when I'd have to be forced to tell people, because I had to make decisions. And so, I approached it like everything else in my life. This is not a big deal. 1 in 8 people have cancer, breast cancer. I have stage 1. If it's graded 0 to 4, I figured, I should be lucky. So I didn't really spend a lot of time. I spent more time looking at the plastic surgery side of what would that look like if I have a double mastectomy. I didn't spend a lot of time on the general surgeon side. I figured, how hard is it to just scoop up boobs and set them aside, or whatever you do?
Right.
Now I learned that that's not how it goes, and surgery has a lot of risks inherent to all the time. And, I cared for people that were elderly that had sepsis and were sick. And ultimately it wasn't the breast cancer that almost killed me. It was sepsis that almost killed me. And, that surgical train of emotion that goes on with it that I planned for a 6-week recovery, back to work, back to hockey, back to being a mom, a wife, a friend, a daughter, a neighbor, everything, just going on. And it was 8 hospitalizations of utter hell. And 6 years later, my last surgery was November 2020. So, I'll be 55 next month, and I'm like, oh, hell, it's like, I can't drive 55. It's like Sammy Hagar, let's go. Now I'm just like more excited about everything because I made it, and so many people didn't,
It's really interesting. So I brought up, I've had surgeries as well. Mine were more elective, but one mistake leads to multiple mistakes. And I don't think people understand that. So, I want more people to come out and talk about this, because not only with plastic surgery, which is, I know you had to go through that as well, but that's no joke. There's a lot of people who have things that require plastic surgery. And the problem is there's a lot of doctors, and this is what I found out after 10 years of dealing with this. Yeah. They'll promise you perfect. There's no such thing. And
No.
the reality is you've got to find somebody who's very, very honest, has a lot of experience, and is going to say, this may not look the way you want it, but it's how it's going to have to be to work. And they don't do that. Not especially in the plastic surgery space.
No.
In the plastic surgery space, there's too many doctors making promises they can't keep up with.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way. I learned after 7 to 8 procedures on one area of my body, and then another area, and then having multiple botches, and it just kept going. It was like one thing led to another thing. And what I learned is there's no such thing as perfection. You chase it, it's never going to happen. You can also chase trying to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So what you have to realize is, first, let's talk about being your own advocate, because I know you had to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's talk about what actually happened, if you're comfortable with that. So
yeah, absolutely.
You go into surgery and you're like, okay, we're going to do this. You pray, you get everybody ready, and you think, here we go. So what happened?
I had it. I thought everything went great. I woke up. I was like a mummy with all the bandages around my chest. I chose a double mastectomy at stage 1 because I had invasive ductal on the left side. Okay. And I had a friend that had stage 0. And so she was 1 degree better than me. I was ER positive, PR positive, and HER negative, which is hormone testing, the same as her. She had elected to have a lumpectomy on the cancer side and radiation for 8 weeks. And then 3 months after that, it went to the other breast. So she ended up, after all of that, having a double mastectomy. And she was running nursing homes like me, had a lot of responsibility for 24-hour operations. And I just thought, I can't do that. I can't run 24-hour operations and have that much pressure of worrying about when it's going to go to the other side. I knew myself, I wouldn't have peace of mind. So I elected the double mastectomy. I was told everything went great. I had great skin. Implants would be no big deal. I was probably an AB my whole life. So I thought, well, what the hell? It's not like I had big boobs and I was going to lose everything. I never had much anyway. So I'm like, okay, I'll just get implants and this is how it's going to go. And, I woke up and I had really bad pain on my non-cancerous side. And I got home, my husband's like, you look like a chainsaw hit you. Like, this doesn't even look right. And I just figured I must have bruised more on this side. I mean, I didn't really know what a double mastectomy is supposed to feel like. I've never had plastic surgery. I figured, it can't feel good. I've had a major surgery. So, nobody's worried about it. And so I'm just going to keep going in. I kept going in and it was blackened area on this side. And I figured it was, honestly, I thought it was bruising. Maybe I was naive, clearly, because I've been around dying tissue and dying skin, taking care of elderly people. I've seen necrosis and dying of skin and sepsis before, but I didn't know what happened to people my age. And so what was really happening is that dark bruising color on this side was really an infection brewing inside my body and was being dismissed. So every time I would say to the doctors, my blood pressure is too low. It's 80/60. This is usually when I'm sick. Nobody was running any labs or, taking me in and looking at it. They just said, no, I don't think your blood pressure readings are right. You can't be that low. I'm like, I'm tired. I don't feel right. I feel off. And then I thought, well, I don't want to look like a hypochondriac. I mean, I'm in the healthcare business, and so if they're okay with it, I'm going to be okay with it. And I was planning on going back to work, and I had my girlfriends come over to have a glass of wine. I was going to go back to work the next day. I was nearing the 30-day mark. First 30 days are critical. I figured I've now learned of post-surgery. That's when you're highest risk for infection. So they came over and, they're like, hey, you don't seem like yourself. And I'm like trying to be happy. I woke up that morning with chest pain at, 4 a.m. I called the plastic surgeon and said, hey, they were in surgery. They said that they'll call me back. I didn't hear back. It was close to noon. They're like, take 4 Advil. You probably did too much. You probably strained yourself. Okay. Nobody's worried. I looked at my discharge. I don't have a temperature. I don't have any drainage. Thought everything's fine. Mm-hmm. And went on with my day. Didn't get dressed. Didn't really feel that great, but I didn't want to call my girlfriends because I was so excited to see people. Right. So it's like, okay, we're going to have a glass of wine and pretend everything's great. And they wanted to see what a mastectomy looked like. And I didn't care. I'm like, I've been modest my whole life, but I'm like, I don't even think this is my body anymore. I've had I'm gutted. I'm just fine. I'll show you. So I showed him. And when I took the bandages off, I was horrified because I had 2 wounds, like the size of bigger than quarters, where it had tunneled into my ribs and opened up. And I thought I had flesh eating disease. I said, I don't know what's happened. Something's, and they're like, you need to get your husband. And from the time I walked to get my husband, I could feel myself just failing. Like I couldn't even have any motor skills. I couldn't hardly walk. He just screamed for my husband. My husband screamed for my son to get the truck started. He was taking me to the ER. He's like, you got to go. And I couldn't get dressed. I had no ability. By the time we got to the hospital, he just went in the ambulance because he's like, you can't walk. Like I was crashing so fast. What was happening is I was really in a heart attack, mild heart attack. I thought it was my chest because I just assumed it was the bruising, but it was likely a pulmonary embolism that had broken off from a blood clot in my leg. Because I went in for that. I had an abnormal EKG and ended up with sepsis. And that was what I was bedbound for 7 days. And then when I got discharged again, it was a blood clot. So I think I had a combination of things happening that were just cascading. Because once you've been sepsis, you're high risk for blood clots and pulmonary embolisms. I didn't know that, but I know it now. So, and then once that happened, I had such a deep infection that it went to my ribs. So I had scar tissue right on my ribs. So on this side, I don't have a lot of skin and tissue left because it had all be scraped out of me. So then I had to wait. At that point, when I was hospitalized, about the 3rd hospitalization, I realized I had to do something. Like, they had at that point told me I had, would never walk again. Probably they had told me I didn't have a blood clot and I had post PT, some type of a nerve damage type thing in my leg. I should go get a nerve block in my leg, CRPS or some chronic thing that you'd be in a wheelchair your whole life and the worst pain. I'm like, I don't have that. I don't think that's what I have. So I ultimately just had my husband drive me to Mayo and decided, you know what, I'm going to be dead or very sick if I don't do something. And,
let's stop there for just a second. So this sounds like a rare thing, but I'm going to tell you, this isn't the first time I've heard stories like this. And I think we go in to surgeries and because no one talks enough about it, people don't know about it. This stuff happens a lot. Sepsis happens a lot in young people. What's the MRSA? Another one that's MRSA is so common and it can kill you. And my mother actually got MRSA and deals with it still. Like it's always something that can come back out. She has to pay attention to it. And it's like, you don't get time. There's not time to think about it. If you get this, you could die. Yeah. And so you said they had to go in. Okay, so you went in. Let's back up a little bit and let's review this. Yeah. You go in, you have sepsis the first time. Yeah. They do another surgery, I'm guessing, or what did they do at that time?
Yeah. Once I was sepsis, they went in, debrided the wound and took my expander out. So I had the one expander on the cancerous side. That one went well. The non-cancerous side was a train wreck. So I had to have the expander out and I had wounds. And then for 3 months, I had to have my mother pack my wounds, twice a day. So I was home again for 3 months and at the time when I came home from the sepsis, I was so sick. I slept all the time. Like my mom had to wake me or my husband had to wake me or my kids to give me a heparin shot or, give me my meds or pack my wounds or make sure I ate, make sure I drank water because I was in a continual sleeping pattern. It was like my body was exhausted from trying to stay alive. Right. And sepsis, that's just what happens, I guess, is it takes a toll on all your organs. So your heart, your lungs, every single organ had to fight to stay alive. And it took a solid 3 months of just the wounds, packing the wounds and getting the infection out of me was the first thing. And then, I knew I'd be years out from fixing my chest because I had to get rid of, I had to get stabilized again, like healthy, Right. So, which took another year, before I could even have the surgery at Mayo to fix my chest wall and put skin from my back onto my chest wall.
Oh, it's a lot. Just taking it. Because somebody who's had multiple surgeries knows that stress, because healing is so emotionally exhausting. Healing from something like that is beyond exhausting, because you don't know, what if you get sick again? You don't, you're always sitting there going, well, what if I get sick again? What if tomorrow I develop you're always in the back of your head. And so I was telling you earlier, my son, so things that happen, and what people don't understand is, when I say advocate, I mean, you have to fight for yourself so hard. When you know something's wrong, don't let somebody tell you, you know what, it's probably just this. I know something's wrong. So my son got very sick and we couldn't figure it out. And I'll tell this story just to kind of give some perspective. And he was a baby. I mean, he was 2 years old, 3, so tiny. And he's a little guy, and he was in pain. I'm like, gosh, he's really like, he would drink something and start to hunch over. And then he would start to like cry. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, even eating. So I'm like, I wonder if it's his throat. Maybe he's sick. So we brought him in ER because it got bad, and must have strep. Strep must have went to his stomach. That's what they thought. So I'm like, okay, I believed him. Couple days later, it's not getting better, maybe almost a week. And I waited a week because we're supposed to have him on the antibiotics and you're supposed to get through it. He's starting to get so much pain. He's getting angry, like a little boy, like screaming, started to bite us. He started to bite us if we tried to feed him, so he's losing weight, massive weight, and he's tiny. We go back in. We were in the ER at least 3 times, maybe 4, went to the doctor at least 2 to 3 times. And they kept saying, it's most likely strep. Oh, it's probably his ears. It's probably this. And I'm like, are you watching him? I can't even hold him down. Like he was in so much pain. I, as an adult, couldn't hold this little boy down. And I had, half the time, 2 adults had to. So they finally agreed to get us in for an ultrasound because they knew it was something in his stomach. I'm like, did he swallow something? I'm just so lost here. So we had to have an ultrasound done, but to get him to go to sit still, we had to knock him out. So we get to the appointment, and very bad communication. They didn't give him anything to knock him out. They gave him like Tylenol. I'm like, good luck. And at this point, he was going to die. And I looked at them and I said, we don't have next week, because it was on a Friday. I said, we don't have next week. Are you looking at this kid? So they wouldn't look, they wouldn't believe me. I'm like, he is dying. Like, we were crying at home. Like, we could see his ribs. We could see every bone on his body.
Oh, it sends chills up
it was horrible.
I know, I've been there. It's awful.
Oh, so then we ended up going to Essentia because we switched hospitals finally. And I said, I'm not leaving here today, because I knew if I leave, I am driving. I'm not even going home. I'm going to the Mayo. So either you help us or we're out of here. And I had my mother-in-law with me, and I could see the tears in her eyes because she was ready to, she's a tough lady. And she was scared. Yeah. So I said, you're going to have to sedate him. I said, I don't know how you're going to do it because he won't sit still. And she's like, well, we'll try this. And he started to flip out so bad. The nurse was like, okay, I'm going to go get something. We're going to knock him out. Yeah. You're going to have to take his clothes off. It was a battle, but when we got his clothes off, the nurse almost started crying and ran out of the room because she finally realized this kid was going to die. She got back in, we sedated him, got him in the ultrasound. They happened to have a brand new type of ultrasound downstairs. And she saw something and she goes, you know what? I'm not a diagnosis. I'm not a doctor, but I bet you he has something called intussusception. Have you ever heard of intussusception? And she was just general about it. I'm like, no. And she's like, it's where the intestinal walls collapse. And she's like, it's pretty common in babies, but it can happen. She's like, I don't know, but that's something to ask the doctor about, because she can't diagnose, right? Right. Doctor comes in and I am distraught. I'm like, we're going to have to go to the Mayo. Like, I was just sitting there waiting. And he comes in and he goes, have you ever heard of something called intussusception? And I said, I haven't until your nurse told me. And I go, and he said, yep, she's pretty smart. And I said, she is one hell of a nurse. Emergency surgery, it was a misdiagnosis by at least 7 doctors. 7. You know how common it was? One of the most common things, and they never checked for it.
And then when you realize that after the fact, then you go, wow, how many other people does this happen to?
Right.
You know, when you go down this thing, you know, it's like an infection or sepsis, or, you know, black and blue is just bruising. Well, you don't know it's black and blue. And it's just that it could be an infection, you know, that's all underneath you growing at a rapid pace, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But after that train leaves, it's like you're on a catch up continually to try to get your body back. Yeah, fighting for your life. And kids, you know, like you say, your son was young at 2. You know, kids have things happen too. And so being an advocate is probably the most, I've advocated for people 85 to 100 my entire life, but never did I think at 48, I'm like, well, you're healthy. Nothing's going to happen when you're our ages, you know? And I realized that I was so sick in the hospital, I couldn't look at my own medical record. Usually I'd be the person that would say, hey, have I had heparin? Have I had a blood thinner? What's my blood pressure? Where am I at? But I was too sick to know where I was. I was too sick. You know, my husband's a financial analyst guy, a computer guy. He doesn't know how to read medical charts or medical words. So to know those things. So, you know, when I wrote the book, I wrote a lot about, you know, don't assume that every surgery, the most basic thing, even your appendix being out or something, you know, the value of taking photos of yourself every day, you know, when you're post-surgery. I wish I would have done that. You know, I write about that in the book. A lot of things, you know, I journaled just some things, but I was too sick to journal. And I didn't realize how much I should have told my mom or should have told my husband about myself and my body. So they would have had more insight, because I assumed I could always look out for myself. But when you're that sick, you can't look out for yourself. You have to have somebody else that can triage you and understand what's your normal temperature. I'm never 98.6. I'm always 96.8, mm-hmm. You know, hardly 97. So for me, 102, when it hit that high, is really high for me. 102, 103 is really high. And so what's normal? You know, what's normal for you? Is it normal for me? And, you know, all those things become critical factors of, you know, what does your blood pressure normally run? What's your oxygen levels? You know, how to read those machines to know what to look for, what tests to ask for, you know, to know if you have a blood clot, to know if you have, how to read interpretive data and to look out for yourself. And then when to know to just say, it's okay to ask for a second opinion or a third opinion, because your gut instinct when you're unsettled is really God's way of saying, to look out for yourself. Yeah. It's not second guessing authority or people's intelligence or their calling to be a doctor, but not everybody makes the right decision. Not everybody looks at everything, you know, just all doctors are not created equal, just like all people, you know, in any profession. You might have somebody that's a phenomenal, you know, dentist or doctor or construction worker, and somebody else, they might be a C student or an F, and they're all in the same profession. And it isn't any different with doctors. That doesn't mean that they're going to communicate with everybody and track it. For me, I had a primary care physician, but I also had then a plastic surgeon, and I had an oncologist. And so when things go wrong, what I write a lot about in the book is, who's the doctor that's taking the lead for your care? Who's the person? Because everybody's a specialty. So, and that's great when things go well, but when things go bad, who's the person that's going to review your medical record? Where are your medical records at? Are they off-site, on-site? And is everybody talking to each other together to know your history? Or are they just treating one individual thing? And I found that nobody was talking to each other. If they would have been talking to each other, it would have been avoided, without a doubt.
Interesting. The statistic on medical mistakes is insane.
I know.
Now,
and
the amount of people who die from medical mistakes, I don't know if I know it's top 5. I know it's top 5.
Yeah. And like to your point, I guess the most upsetting thing for me too is that having a cancer diagnosis almost made it permissible to have mistakes, simple mistakes, like 101 level of things that should have happened. We're like, well, it's like, well, if anything bad happened to me and I died, well, she's cancer. She's got breast cancer. So that's a check. That's a pass for everybody. Anything can go wrong because she got cancer. And it's like, look, I'm not like in a critical car accident where you had to make decisions here, you know, to keep me alive, which I would have been more okay with that if I died than how I could have died in the way my case really was, because it was just mishap after mishap after mishap of people not asking questions. I went in with a history of one blood clot. They knew that. My biggest concern was to prevent blood clots, making sure the medications I was on would match, making sure there was communication. And when things go wrong, it's usually Friday night at 10 o'clock, and you got an on-call doctor who might not even be your normal doctor. And you're going in on the weekend, and you're going into ER, and then who's talking? You got an ER doctor, you got a hospitalist, you've got nobody that knows you. And then are they talking to the doctor that's been case managing you, hopefully, before you went in for surgery? And the answer might be no. And so then who is your advocate? And what I learned from it is that you have to have somebody in your family or a friend, when it can't be you, that can be that advocate to ask the tough questions. When it's 2 a.m. on Saturday night and you got an on-call doctor who knows nothing about you.
Exactly. And it happens a lot. I read a book and it was called Outliers. It's a really popular book. And it talked about the aviation industry and how they changed it when there was plane crashes and people, and what they did was they had 100% accountability. You can't get in trouble for blowing the whistle. Right. Not like that in the medical profession. And that's why the medical profession suffers, because the nurses are scared to tell the doctors, even when they see stuff, they're like, well, that might not be wrong or right. And I read very interesting stories about a woman who died for no reason because the nurse was too afraid to tell the doctor. And when she did, he blew her off, and the woman ended up dying of something very basic. And this happens every day all over. There's not the accountability that there is in other industries, and there has to be. And this is a really good point. And I love that you wrote this book, and I'm so proud of you, because it takes stories like this to keep happening and coming out and saying, listen, we need more advocates at our side. We don't all have our moms. I have a crazy mom and I love her. She's my advocate. Like, she'll come in and she'll be like, I want this test. She doesn't care. She's not afraid. But I'm not always going to have her in my corner. And the thing is that who's in your corner? Are they brave enough? And I am a very passive person when it came to, in the beginning phases of going into doctors, saying, hey, I don't agree with that, or I don't know if that's right. Please listen to me. I was pushed off so many times with my kids, at least, that, you're a new mom. I'm like, but I'm not a new mom. This is my second child. I'm like, and they did that with my daughter, said she was colicky for 2 years. Listen to this story. So this is a different kid.
Yeah.
From the day she was born, we get her, she was crying, but it never looked like she was just crying to cry. She always seemed like she was in pain. Brought her in so many times, kept saying, also underweight. My husband and I thought we'd never have another kid, because it was that traumatizing. I was in school. He was traveling for work. Yeah. We go on a family vacation, and we're just so used to her that we just know that she's hard to deal with. We handled her. On the way home, she starts choking herself. She's digging in her throat, crying, almost, she was turning purple. I'm like, oh, she's choking. She's in a car seat. So we're almost home from a 17-hour drive home. I'm like, pull over. We go straight to the urgent care. And I'm like, something is so wrong with her. I'm like, number one, she has been not right for so long. It was her stomach, her throat. We get in, we get a totally different doctor. Again, after all the doctor visits we had, he took one look at her and he goes, she has the most severe case of strep I've ever seen in my life. And I said, she's probably had this the entire time. I asked them to look at her throat. They would be like, never looked close enough. We got her on antibiotics. Now, mind you, she's almost 2 years old. Antibiotics for 3 months straight. I finally found out who my daughter was. She has been an angel ever since. They misdiagnosed her that many times. She had swollen and enlarged tonsils the entire time, and she caught a herpetic infection somehow in her mouth, and it was so painful, but because of the tonsils, she could barely breathe. She wasn't eating because she couldn't get food down.
No.
3 months on antibiotics, that was fixed.
And then you find out, and you know your intuition of when your child's not right, when you're not right. And I went through that when I had, a baby. Our second baby I was on bed rest with him and our older son, when he broke his leg in Canada playing hockey, dealt with healthcare and crises and emergencies. And when you're a mom and you have kids and you're in and out of ER and urgent care, and then you're like, okay, do I take them? Do I not take them? Are they breathing? Are they not breathing? You get to know your kids pretty well. And and as an adult, as just a wife and a mom and a 48-year-old woman, I'm like, well, this can't be that bad. I mean, I just have stage 1 out of 4. That's a pretty good score. And I kept telling myself, I can't make a big deal out of this. I should be lucky. And then I'm thinking to myself, how are all my friends that have stage 3 or more doing better than I am? I am look like I could be on the botched TV show. And I would joke that I should be a candidate someday if I could be ever naked in front of any show this disaster to the world. But, I'm like, I'd be a good candidate, but and you just wonder if you're looking at the right things or not and how this happened, because you don't want to ask all the questions because, you just think this should be simple or not a big deal. And, but I think the silver lining in it has been to learn how to be in tune to yourself and making sure if an emergency happens that you have somebody else to be an advocate for you that really knows and that will ask the tough questions and not be okay with being pacified.
Right. And listen to your body. I think
listen to your body. Yeah.
A lot of us don't. And I'm very in tune with my body because of all the things that I've gone through as well.
Me too.
And so I used to be like, I don't want to bother the doctor. I don't want to do this. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, no, I'm going to bother them. I'm going to tell them this isn't going right. I know myself. I know when I've had something even recently happen. And of course, what day did it happen on? Friday night.
Yeah.
Friday night. Tried to call, couldn't get, I'm like, of course it happened on a Friday night.
Yep.
But lucky enough, this doctor of mine had given me a prescription to have in case something like that happened. Because she was being smart. That's the thing is you have to also find the right doctor and don't be afraid. This is the other part. Do not be afraid to go to a different doctor.
No.
Because I stuck with a doctor that screwed me up so bad that I am paying for it 10 years later still. And it's like money, healing, time, emotional stress, pain. My kids have experienced oh, mom's got to deal with this again. It's like, you have to find the right doctors and you have to find an advocate. You are right. Not just you, because if you cannot speak for yourself, you need to know damn well someone's going to stand up for you and make sure you're okay. And so the book, you did the book. It's got a feeling. Let's talk about it. Talk about the book.
The book,
when did you start writing it?
I started writing it probably a year after when I had my reconstructive surgery. I'd have my back muscle was like filleting a walleye and bringing it to the front to create a new chest wall. And when I went to Mayo, I was home again for a couple months. It was a 12-hour surgery. It was a major surgery. And I journaled and I was just journaling. And later on, when I went to see my parents in Florida, I was on an airplane and I was just head down writing for, 3 hours. And this guy sitting next to me is like, are you a writer? And I said, no, not really. I just like to write. And he's like, well, you haven't even had your head up for 3 hours. I said, well, I got a lot to say. And so I said, I write for me. And he goes, well, what are you writing about if I can ask? I said, I'm just kind of writing about what happened with my breast cancer. And I started on plan A and I'm kind of on plan F and it's kind of all about that. And I just write for myself to heal. And he's like, I think you should think about writing a book because can't remember if it was his sister, but somebody he knew had breast cancer. Things went bad. And he's like, I think you could help a lot of other people. And I thought, well, so I started writing and just, I had like 14,000 words. And my son was like, Mom, that's an essay. That's not a book. So you're going to need like 40,000. And I'm like, you're kidding. So then I just started laying out the chapters and decided that it was going to be cheaper than therapy if I wrote a book. And it would be more my style to be able to write what it was like for me. And not that it was everybody's experience, but it could be more of a storyteller, which is really my lane of how I talk and live. And I could just hopefully help other people. I had a friend that died of sepsis, a month before I was diagnosed, she passed away and had 5 kids from my hometown. And it was just a gardening injury that got infected and it got missed. And she died on their 25th anniversary of a heart attack in the middle of the night. And it could have been me. So it was like, I became more passionate about trying to help other people because she died at 42. I was 48. It was like, nobody thinks you're going to die of sepsis. And so I thought I'm going to write the book. And, so I ended up naming it. It was going to be, I had a million names and it ended up being The Scars You Can't See because the real healing happened when the surgeries were done. I thought the surgeries were going to solve my problems. The cancer would be gone, the medications. but I had no idea that I was much more broken on the inside of figuring it all out than I planned for. I planned for the surgical physicalness of it all, like time off of work, healing, sick. It's going to suck, just get ready for a suck zone and just take it in. And, everybody, how are you doing? And it's like, you have to say, fine. Well, I got so accustomed to doing that I never even knew I had to heal. And it wasn't going to happen until the last surgery was over. And so when I wrote the book, I would cry every time I was writing. And it took me years to write because I couldn't get through a chapter because I was just like sobbing. And then I would be flooded with the emotions. And I like, well, clearly I haven't healed,
Yeah.
So it was a good way for me. And I just thought, if I write the book for me and then it ends up helping anybody else, it'll just be a bonus. So that's what I did.
I love it. And nobody prepares you for the emotional.
No.
Nobody prepares you. And also what happens anytime you cut your body, this is something else that I've found, it releases traumas of the past. So this isn't always about the actual surgery or the cancer trauma. There's traumas that you hold in, things you don't remember.
Yeah.
And I went through a very major surgery this year that unlocked a lot of shame.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, what is this? And I had to heal that. And I'm also writing a book currently, but it's very healing, but being able to talk about it, being able to share your story, the scars that you can't see. I love that title, by the way, is incredible. But we are just so grateful that you shared with us because breast cancer is very common. Cancer is everywhere. And
I know.
It's not just that. People are going under the knife all the time and they do not understand what's going to happen. They do not understand these risks. Like everyone can tell you, well, here's the risks. And you look at the paper and you're like, I get it.
And you sign. And you're like, sign, you can't have the surgery. And I
sounds
like,
good.
Okay.
Yeah. Fix me. Sounds good. Didn't read it. Okay. But you don't understand the emotional road you're going to go on. And it doesn't matter if you had a great healing or not. It will release or bring up things that you've never planned on. And you have to be ready for that. And then if you think about the consistent taking of drugs, not just narcotics, ibuprofen all the time and all the things you're taking and the supplements, it's very, very wearing. And your body goes through so much more than people, I think, know because nobody talks about it. So I'm really grateful that you are our advocate with this book. It's very important to me because people need to hear more about this and people need to understand that medical mistakes happen daily. People die from medical mistakes every day and at a high level. So it's important to be aware of that too. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful you reached out. I'm grateful for this. And you're so close. We're going to have coffee.
I know.
I'm right there. I mean, I'm up on the Dyke Road all the time. I'm always up there. So I can come get my kids and come say hi. So it's always great, but you're an incredible woman and brave. And honestly, you have such a good personality and outlook at life. Like you took this and you did what you should have done with it. You made. Well,
I figured he spared me for a reason. And so as corny as that might sound, I believe it. And, you sit there and wonder why the hell is this happening to you? And there's something that's supposed to happen. And I now know I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I was supposed to be an advocate for people. I never knew 8 million people die every year worldwide of sepsis. I never knew that, and it puts it in perspective when it's like double of the amount of COVID people that we've had. And this has been going on forever, and so it's like babies are dying, people getting their wisdom teeth get infected, kids, all ages of sepsis. And people don't know what to look for the signs. So I figure, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And so the book's out. People can check out the website. And it's going to be released in November.
So share the website and how people get a hold of you or want to get the book so we can do that.
It's called The Scars You Can't See. And my website is nataliezeleznakar.com. It's NATALIEZELEZNIKAR.com. And there I'm on Facebook too, Natalie Zeleznikar author, and you can pre-order the book. It'll be off the press in November. And it's a lot about healing, finding a new you, redefining yourself, your body image, all the things that happen in all of our lives of really the scars you can't see that we all have to deal with. So,
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And you definitely are an advocate for all of us just being on the show and sharing. And this has been another incredible episode of Grit and Grace. I'm Shylo, and you will catch us on the next episode. Have a great day.
Thanks a million.
Okay.
Now, glutathione is a big word, but it's the body's own master antioxidant. So it's a scavenger for free radicals, for bacteria, and what's relevant now, viruses. This is new to the marketplace. There's no other product on the market that has the ingredient NACET.
And basically NACET increases the production of that glutathione that is in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system and keep it strong. Elevated sense of well-being. Supports muscle strength and endurance. Cognitive function. Powerful liver support. Energy. Helps blood sugar regulation. Superior bioavailability of key ingredients.
One of your best defenses against COVID is a strong immune system. Taking GSH Plus as a daily supplement does all that. And now we have the product out on the marketplace.